New York City, the 90s. It was the decade that saw a peak in crime.
Police say the homicide count will top 2,200 before the year is out.
From random acts of violence to planned attacks, New York witnessed some of the most brutal crimes in this turning point decade. Right now, Fox 5's Crime in the City, 90s edition. Tourists travel from all over the world to visit New York, but that doesn't make them immune from the city's crime. Brian Watkins, a 22-year-old tourist visiting with his family from Utah, is fatally stabbed in a subway station when he tried defending his mother during a mugging.
We start with a terrible story this evening. The way the police tell it, it was a murder before dancing. A tourist from Utah, Brian Watkins, murdered in a mugging so that some young men from Queens could get money to get into a dance at Roseland. And that's where the police found most of them after the stabbing in the subway. Lynn White is standing by at 100 Center Street. That's where the young men are waiting to face a judge. Lynn?
That's right, John. They are waiting now for their arraignment hearing, which is expected to happen sometime after 11 or 11:30 this evening. They, of course, have been charged with robbery and with second-degree murder, the murder of a tourist from Utah who died while trying to save his mother. At 22, Brian Watkins had dreams of becoming a professional tennis player, but those dreams died with him near the cold concrete subway station platform where he was stabbed on Sunday night trying to protect his mother. He and his family had come here from Provo, Utah to see the U.S. Open tennis tournament. While his family picked out his assailants in a police lineup, Brian returned home in a casket.
The violence that's here in the city, I thought it was totally ridiculous.
I think it's outrageous. It's scary, too. It's scary for everybody to know that can happen in New York City.
Scary is the way some tourists en route to the U.S. Open by subway described what happened to Brian. He and his family were standing on this subway platform at 53rd and 7th Avenue on Sunday night. They were waiting to take the train 2 stops to Tavern on the Green for dinner. They were suddenly surrounded by a group of 8 young men from Queens. One of those young men began to steal money from his father. Another threw his mother to the ground and then started to kick her in the head. That's when Brian and his brother stepped in to save her. But Brian ended up with a stab wound to the chest. He died en route to the hospital. These 8 18-year-olds were rounded up and charged with second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. Yul Gary Morales is the one police believe fatally stabbed Brian Watkins in the chest. The motive for the mugging, according to the cops, they wanted money to go dancing at Roseland. And it was at Roseland, ironically, that 5 of the alleged assailants were picked up by the police. Now, it's believed that the Watkins family will stay in New York until that hearing is over, the arraignment hearing of the 8 young men accused of their son's murder. And they will stay here and then board a plane for Utah, where they will attend their son's funeral. The funeral of a young man who came to New York to enjoy a tennis tournament and instead ended up a victim in a coffin, an all too familiar statistic of crime, murder, and violence on a New York City police blotter.
Yul Gary Morales was convicted in the killing of Watkins along with several others. Johnny Nkapié, who was also convicted in the mugging, has his conviction overturned in 2015. Sometimes violent crime happens when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. In Red Hook, Brooklyn, a principal who left his school building to search for a student found himself in the crossfire of drug gangs and was killed.
Patrick Daly was a very dedicated school principal, and his dedication cost him his life. Steve Powers reports.
He was the kind of grade school principal here in New York who was chosen for an inspiring portrait on the network news. But the bullet that tore into Patrick Daly's chest, killing him, did not know or care that he was the model principal of PS 15 in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Authorities say Daly, who was the father of 3, was trying to find a 9-year-old child who had left school in a huff after a fight with another student. Police say Daly apparently got caught in the crossfire of warring drug dealers in the Red Hook housing project, a project known in the neighborhood by some as OK Corral.
I heard shots ring out, from the window where I was at. And I looked, and all I seen was a white guy in a long trench coat with a hat walking. And then the shots rang out again, and he ducked. More shots rang out, and he just dropped, and he was laying on his back.
Mr. Daly was struck once in the chest by what appears to be a 9mm round. 9mm casings were found in the area. The assailant or assailants fled the scene. We have no description at this time. Mr. Daly expired here at the hospital.
Mr. Daly was a very nice man, and he'll always give us advices not to be bad or anything like that.
He was a caring person. He was family to everyone. You know, it's just a traumatic loss. I grieve for him, for his family, as well as for what this community is going to be going through after, due to the loss of him.
Obviously, the staff is distraught, the kids are distraught, people throughout the community are. And this is one more, I think, terrible example of why we have to get guns off our streets.
It said that the children are most important to our future. But today, a caretaker of children's education is gunned down and murdered. And children are shot down in the streets in crossfire. You have to wonder whether they'd even put up with this in Dodge City in its worst days.
We leave the city for Long Island and one of the most horrific attacks this area has ever seen. Colin Ferguson, a man from Brooklyn, opens fire inside a commuter train to Hicksville, killing 6 and injuring 19 others.
Tonight, that man, Colin Ferguson, is in custody, and we know a lot about him now. At the same time, the horrible images of the LIRR massacre are still vividly etched in all of our minds. Tonight, team coverage from the investigation to the cautious commuters to the words of grieving friends and relatives. First, the latest grim figures. 5 people now dead from that gunman's bullets. They all lived on Long Island. 20 more were wounded. Eric Shawn is here right now with some exclusive new details. Eric.
That's right, John. Authorities blame Colin Ferguson's racial hatred for this horrible tragedy. And we have learned he apparently blamed racism for another incident on the subway last year. But first, the alleged gunman.
Go. Why did you do it?
Help me! Help me!
Why'd you do it?
Help me!
Now, he pleads for help. But last night, Colin Ferguson had no sympathy for his alleged victims. Innocent commuters on their way home when they were cut down by a madman with a gun. 5 were killed, 23 wounded, and police say the reason was racially motivated revenge, as Ferguson allegedly launched his own one-man terrorist attack on the white and Asian suburban commuters returning to Long Island. Ferguson is 35 years old, single, unemployed, born in Kingston, Jamaica. He lives in Brooklyn, and authorities say he harbors a deep hatred for whites, Asians, conservative blacks, and chose to kill on the Long Island Railroad and not in New York City because he did not want to embarrass Mayor David Dinkins, who is also an African American. But as he sat in the backseat of a police car driving to his arraignment, Ferguson pleaded for us to help him, and he told me the claim he hates whites is not true.
Help me!
Why? Why do you hate people? They say you hate whites. You did it to...
That's a lie. That's a lie.
You did it to
The person who committed this crime is an animal who turned that Long Island Railroad car into a death chamber.
The paperwork reveals strong hostility being harbored by him in terms of racism.
They say Ferguson calmly walked backwards down the train aisle, opening fire at the terrified passengers with this unlicensed 9mm semi-automatic handgun that he bought for $400 legally in California. It was a murder spree that lasted a gruesome and agonizing 2 minutes until he was tackled by 3 hero passengers. And police say they found 100 more rounds of ammunition in Ferguson's bag.
And it seems he had hostilities regarding a major portion of the population and a variety of institutions.
Those hostilities were revealed in handwritten notes police found on Ferguson.
He mentions Adelphi University, where he was a student. He mentions the governor's office, Governor Cuomo's office and staff. He talks about Uncle Tom Negroes. He talks about rich black attorneys.
The notes name Brooklyn activist Herbert Daughtry, Harlem Reverend Calvin Butts, and lawyer C. Vernon Mason, who says he's never heard of Ferguson.
This man should be behind bars, and he should stay behind bars, and they should throw away the key.
Ferguson allegedly declares, New York City was spared because of my respect for Mayor David Dinkins and Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly. Nassau County is the venue. Additional reasons for this? Sloppy running of the number 2 train. It is racism by Caucasians and false allegations against me by the filthy Caucasian racist female on the number 1 line. For this tragic shooting is not the first time Ferguson allegedly caused trouble on a train. In October of last year, a white female passenger on a northbound IRT train accused Ferguson of elbowing, threatening, and yelling profanities at her as they sat next to each other. Transit police were called and he filed a civil complaint against the police. allegedly sending this letter to Police Commissioner Kelly, charging the cops and the women who complained were all racist against him. Also mentioned in the note was Manhattan lawyer Lauren Abramson, who he went to see about a case. She says he even threatened her.
I was not surprised. Well, he had threatened our office in late September or early October. And he had, at that time, although I just didn't even think about it, at that time he had stated that it wasn't a direct threat, but he had been calling and he didn't believe that I was not in the office when I really was on trial. And he kept calling and calling, and he finally said to somebody at our office, he reminded them that there had just been a killing in California where a gentleman had gone into a law office and killed a number of people. So we took that as a threat, and we did inform the police.
The mayor has heatedly denounced this horrible, horrible act. And tonight, Ferguson is in the Nassau County Jail with no bail. Psychiatric tests have been ordered. And while he told me he does not hate, it seems almost inconceivable to imagine the anger that could have sparked this rampage. A massacre that in many ways was also an attack on all of us. John?
Eric, I remember years ago covering the Manson trial, standing a few feet away from Charles Manson, looking him in the eye and getting sick to my stomach. How about your feelings when you looked into this animal's eyes?
It's incredible just to realize that he was in the car. I looked into his face as he was telling me, claiming that it is a lie, that he does not hate people. Imagining, A, how he could say that, but also I really honestly didn't see anything in his eyes, and that was kind of scary. People on the train said that it seemed like he was in outer space. Even when he was arrested, he got up and looked and said, "I'd done something wrong."
Colin Ferguson is currently serving his sentence of 315 years and 8 months to life behind bars. And violent crime can happen in the most unlikely of places. In 1994, William Tager of North Carolina attempted to enter NBC studios in Rockefeller Plaza. He then shot and killed a stagehand who attempted to call the police.
Good evening, everyone. John and Rosanna are on vacation. I'm Mario Bosques. We know a lot more tonight about why a crazed gunman opened fire at Rockefeller Center, killing an NBC stagehand. But his motive sounds as strange as the shooting. We've got team coverage on this story, including a look at the man arrested and his surprising ties to New York. We start tonight with Linda Schmidt, who has more on the mind of an accused killer.
46-year-old William Tager of Charlotte, North Carolina, didn't say a word on his way to Central Booking. Police say he fired this Chinese-made simulated AK-47 assault rifle, killing NBC stagehand Theron Montgomery. NBC's surveillance camera reveals Montgomery seen in the lower right-hand corner wearing a white T-shirt. Tager's in the upper left. They're looking at each other as Montgomery is on his way to alert police that Tager has a gun. The next picture shows Tager in the upper left-hand corner leaning against a tree as he aims at Montgomery. Montgomery is out of the camera's view when he's gunned down. Seconds later, police have Tager on the ground. They say that he came to New York to get even with television executives.
He said NBC, CBS, and ABC were the networks that were after him. They were bugging him. They were tapping his phone. They were sending rays out through the television set, and he couldn't take it anymore.
Police say that Tager came to the Today Show because it was easy to find. They advertised that they're broadcast in the famous Rockefeller Center, and he shot Montgomery, calling him a network goon. Tager allegedly packed an arsenal in his car. The AK-47 was fully loaded with 29 more bullets that could have killed. There were another 248 bullets to fire from the rifle, plus 2 magazine clips loaded with 30 rounds and 28 live rounds for his Beretta pistol. NBC stagehands found it difficult to work today.
Just kind of put a cloud over the show.
He was a great guy. He was just doing his job. What's to say? You got crazy people all over the place. You just got to be careful today. It's tough to trust people. That's what it comes down to.
A passerby placed flowers at the deadly scene. Former NBC employee Bill McCauley is Montgomery's neighbor.
That's exactly in keeping with who he was, he encountered a situation and tried to help the way I'd seen him do here.
Sadly, this time, Theron Montgomery paid the ultimate price for trying to do the right thing. In Midtown, Linda Schmidt, Fox News.
William Tager was convicted and received a sentence of 12.5 to 25 years in prison on November 29, 1996. He was released on parole in October 2010. A fiery explosion rocks the New York City subway in Lower Manhattan. Edward Leary, an unemployed computer programmer from New Jersey, was charged in that and a similar attack that happened in Harlem.
Police have made an arrest in the chilling firebombing on a downtown subway.
And we have exclusive pictures of the man police say may be responsible. This is Edward Leary of Scotch Plains, New Jersey. Police say the firebomb went off in his hands. He is still in the hospital. More on him in a moment, but first we begin our team coverage with Eric Sean, who has the latest on the investigation from City Hall. And Eric, incredible new information coming from today's press conference.
We know now more about Edward Leary, the 49-year-old unemployed computer programmer who police say was the man who carried that firebomb on his lap when it exploded on the train yesterday. And incredibly, they say his motive was extortion, that he was trying to get money, perhaps millions, from the transit authority. That this may be linked to a previous incident last week in which a firebomb exploded in the book bag that was next to some young students up in Harlem at West 145th Street. So if that was the first incident, this perhaps could have been the second, though the officials would not say if this accidentally went off in his bag yesterday as he was planning or trying to perhaps plan another attack. But he has been arrested. The DA, Robert Morgenthau, indicated he will be charged with 45 counts of assault. For the 45 people who have been injured, there has been talk of counts of attempted murder earlier, but we have not heard about that. As you can see, the news conference is continuing, and we've learned a little more about Mr. Leary from the mayor, from the police commissioner, William Bratton, and the other officials.
Shortly after the bombing in that 6-car, a male approached transit police at the Clark Street station in Brooklyn requesting medical assistance. That's the transit officer that the mayor referenced. As the officers were planning to remove the male to Cornell Hospital, they learned of a description of a man seen fleeing the blast in the subway. Upon further information received by transit police detectives from witnesses at the scene, fitting the description of the male, Edward J. Leary, that he was seen carrying a bag that reeked of gasoline on the train prior to the explosion, witnesses giving us this information. It was determined that Leary had at least 2 addresses in New York and 1 in New Jersey, 2 apartments in Brooklyn located at 10 Plaza Street East.
The minimum charge, as I see it now, is it's assault in the first degree, which carries a sentence of 5 to 15 years, but there will be 45 assault charges because it's an assault on 45 people.
The motive, we are comfortable that this was part of a scheme to extort money, that the devices were going to be utilized in furtherance of that effort. There has been significant evidence retrieved that would support that as the motive, and beyond that, we really, till the district attorney moves a little more forward, can't go into the specifics of the evidence that's been recovered, but it would appear that motive was an extortion scheme, and that has nothing to do with terrorism or any external forces, but rather the actions of this individual for a personal motive, which was extortion.
Well, Mr. Leary lives in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. He is married. His wife, Marge, has a 10-year-old son named William. He also owns 2 apartments in Brooklyn on Plaza Street in Park Slope, right off Grand Army Plaza. Both the locations have been searched by police and Bob's squad and ATF and FBI investigators, and they say they have found evidence linking to an extortion scheme and other evidence consistent with this type of firebomb that Mr. Leary allegedly was carrying yesterday. Also, he had been out of work for at least a year, had been working at Merrill Lynch as a computer consultant and programmer, so apparently may have had some financial problems, because there are other reports that he and his wife Marge were separated, that she was living in Brooklyn and he was living at the house in Scotch Plains where he would pick up his son, and then also that he was allegedly taking the drug Prozac. Officials here would not go into detail about those other details about Mr. Leary. Right now, he is in the New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center burn unit with 3rd-degree burns over 40% of his body. His face and skin was burned, his hands around his chest, as well as his legs and his feet. Police officers found him at the in Clark Street, which is the station on the other side of the river in Brooklyn, wandering around about an hour after the explosion. We talked to one of the police officers who found him, Anthony Rayo, who talked to us last night about how he found the suspect.
He had burns to the face and burns to his legs below the knees.
Police officer Anthony Roa knew something was wrong with the badly burned subway passenger he found in Brooklyn at the Clark Street station, a mile and a half from the explosion. He said the man did not want to talk about what happened or how he got there.
He didn't talk? He could talk.
Was he coherent?
He was coherent. He just didn't want to sit down, and he didn't want to be approached by the police. He just wanted medical attention.
Did he say why he was there or what he was doing?
That's what I asked him. I asked him, how did you get here from over there? He goes, I came through the tunnel. So I asked him, how did you get here from over there? Did you walk or did you take the train? At that time, he stopped answering any other questions. And then he started getting nervous. I wanted to lean against something. At that time, my suspicions were raised.
Roa and his partner put Leary in an ambulance for the ride to the Cornell Burn Unit in Manhattan. On the way, they heard the radio description of a possible suspect and realized they may have caught the man for whom the city was looking.
And sure enough, an ID was made, and he is now the, suspect.
Detectives also this morning found Mr. Leary's car, a 1987 Dodge, on the streets of Brooklyn. Again, they believe the motive, extortion, by Edward Leary, an unemployed computer programmer from Wall Street. Of course, we'll have much more tonight at 10 o'clock. I'm live at City Hall. Eric Shawn. Then back to you.
Thank you very much for that report, Eric. Well, police have begun piecing together a picture of the man accused of this horrible crime that injured 45 people. After the smoke cleared, he was found wandering the streets in Brooklyn, as Eric Shawn just told us. Apparently, he walked all the way through the subway tunnel. He was severely hurt, and he asked police to call him an ambulance. Susan Kelleher is in Boerum Hill, Brooklyn, and she has an update on that story for us. Susan?
Well, Lynn, bomb suspect Ed Leary's car is just one of the many pieces in this bizarre puzzle, and it was a parking ticket that led police to that car this morning, parked on this block here at 98 Smith Street. When bomb squad investigators realized it was Leary's car, they weren't about to take any chances.
Dressed in protective gear, a bomb squad investigator does a careful search of bomb suspect Ed Leary's 86 Dodge. The discovery forced the evacuation of 500 people over a 2-block area.
I thought the building was going to blow up.
Pretty scary?
Yes, very.
After a 20-minute search, investigators found no explosive materials in the car.
Do you have any evidence from the searches you did at the other residences or that other officials did that there was definitely something in the car? Did you have any information, or were you just being very cautious?
We were being cautious. I wasn't privy to any additional information of that nature.
Ed Leary was stopped by police after the 4-train firebombing. He was badly burned, his clothes in tatters, when he was found at the Clark Street station in Brooklyn. At his Scotch Plains home last night, federal agents seized several bags of evidence. Leary was living the good life here, working as a computer programmer at Merrill Lynch, until 1 year ago when he was terminated for performance reasons. He's reportedly on the drug Prozac for depression and is separated from his wife, Marge. He owns 2 units in this Prospect Heights co-op, where his wife may now be living.
What kind of a guy was he?
Always very nice with me, very nice indeed. Anytime I had needed anything done, my TV or anything, he took care of it.
Police did remove several items from Leary's car, among them a flare, some maps. They also removed other things they wouldn't tell us about. They did dust that car for fingerprints. By the way, this car was found not far from where police found Leary at that Clark Street station. How it all fits in this investigation still remains to be seen. We're live in Brooklyn. I'm Susan Kelleher. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. We want to update you on the conditions of the injured. In all, 45 people were hurt in the firebombing. 43 had to be hospitalized. Most, however, have been released. 2 patients are still at New York Downtown Hospital. 1 is in stable condition. The other has severe burns to the hands and face. 2 passengers are still at St. Vincent's. 1 man, 1 woman, both are going to be okay. 12 passengers are still at New York Hospital. We are told that 4 are critical, and that includes the suspect.
And it is truly a miracle that everyone survived the firebombing. Those on the subway have amazing stories of survival and terror. Mike Sheehan is at New York Downtown Hospital with more. Mike?
Lynn, 5 of the injured were rushed here to New York's Downtown Hospital. It was just blocks from the scene. One of those, Dennis Theodore, was rushed here with chest pains. I spoke with him exclusively from his hospital bed just minutes ago.
The doors opened and there was just an explosion, and everybody was trampling over everybody to get out, you know. I mean, it happened within a minute of seconds, you know. And I seen people there laying on the ground burnt, you know. I mean, they were right on top of the explosion. You know, there's one woman I tried helping. She had burns all over her legs and arms. They took over the Cornell. I'm a lucky guy to be, you know. I just thank God that that I'm alive, you know, and everyone else is. You know, it could have been very worse than it was, you know. And just thank God the train was in the station and the doors were open. If it wasn't,
Definitely, right.
we would have been dead.
Do you remember seeing the guy who was apparently holding this thing?
I remember seeing him afterwards. You know, he was burnt. You know, he was burnt. His both legs were burnt. His pants was burnt. Then he just disappeared. You know, I mean, he disappeared into the crowd. I mean, everybody was running all over the place. You know, it was thank God for the NYPD. They got there quick. You know, they really helped out. You know.
One last question. I know that they want to start working on you. Any advice for anybody in the future on the subways? Are you going to continue to ride the subway?
Oh, no, I'm not going to continue riding the subway. I don't normally do ride the subway. You know, I normally drive to work. But it just happened yesterday. I had to go into Manhattan.
Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Theodore is certainly one of the lucky ones, and I'm told by the doctors here that he will be spending Christmas at home with his family. Reporting live from the Beekman Downtown Hospital, I'm Mike Sheehan. Now back to you in the studio.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Well, that is good news. Transit workers were heroes in their own right. Just hours after the incident, things were back to normal on the Lexington Avenue line. Down in the station, there were no visible signs of the chaos and destruction. Gone was the burned subway car, and all debris was cleared from the platform and the tracks.
Edward Leary is currently serving a 94-year prison sentence. A series of attacks against women that was plaguing the city comes to an end when police find evidence at an Upper East Side dry cleaners that leads to a break in the case.
We are waiting for the 22-year-old who confessed to a one-man crime wave to have his day in court.
Well, along his admitted trail of terror, 4 women brutalized, 1 fatally. We were the first ones to tell you about his arrest and confession yesterday. And today, the Fox News team is right back out there. Eric Glasser is live at the suspect's old high school in the Bronx. Fox 5's Mike Sheehan broke this story. He's live in Lower Manhattan with the latest on the investigation. Mike.
Well, Carol, 22-year-old John Royster, alleged by cops to be the Jekyll and Hyde type monster who hunted down and then brutally attacked 4 women in this city, today sits in a cell right behind me awaiting arraignment on murder and attempted murder charges. The key to all 4 cases was a palm print left by Royster on the front window of the Dutch Girl Cleaners. The 22-year-old allegedly told cops that he leaned on the glass while kicking his unconscious victim, Evelyn Alvarez, and rifling her pockets. Crime scene detectives carefully lifted that latent print and a bloodied fingerprint from a plastic bag next to the body. By Wednesday afternoon, they matched the print to Royster, who, after detectives told Royster he left his signature, a print, at the murder scene, he confessed. Then, as detectives remarked just how closely he resembled the sketch of the man wanted in connection with the Central Park attack, Royster eventually gave in and allegedly said, "You know I'm the guy. I left my prints on the fence." Royster then graphically described how he hunted the park victim, isolating her and beating her to the ground, tearing off her blouse and skirt, and then the clue that would allegedly seal his guilt. He told cops he was so excited by the sight of the bleeding victim's breasts, he ejaculated in a napkin, which he left near the victim, but which cops recovered. Now on a roll, Royster allegedly told detectives he attacked a woman on a footbridge in Yonkers. He then gave Yonkers cops details known only by the attacker. Lastly, he allegedly admitted to beating a 51-year-old woman writer jogging along the FDR Drive by the 60th Street heliport. The 22-year-old confessed killer was identified in several lineups held at the 19th Squad yesterday. Detectives are now awaiting the results of a court-ordered blood test. They took blood from Royster yesterday. His blood is being compared to semen, which was left at the scene in Central Park.
John Royster is currently serving his life sentence. And that's this week's Crime in the City. Subscribe for more at youtube.com/Fox5NY.